Okay, so we'll chant from chapter 2, the same ones we chanted last time, that is verses 31 through 40. Chapter 2.
व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम् वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनम् देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम् मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवम् स्वधर्ममपि चावेक्ष्य न विकम्पितुमर्हसि धर्म्याद्धियुद्धात् श्रेयोऽन्यत् क्षत्रियस्य न विद्यते यदृच्छया चोपपन्नं स्वर्गद्वारमपावृतम् सुखिनः क्षत्रियाः पार्थ लभन्ते युद्धमीदृशम् अथ चित्त्वमिमं धर्म्यं सङ्ग्रामं न करिष्यसि ततः स्वधर्मं कीर्तिं च हित्वा पापमवाप्स्यसि अकीर्तिं चापि भूतानि कथयिष्यन्ति ते व्ययाम् सम्भावितस्य चाकीर्तिर्मरणादतिरिच्यते भयाद्रणादुपरतम् मन्स्यन्ते त्वां महारथाः येषां च त्वं बहुमतो भूत्वा यास्यसि लाघवम् अवाच्यवादांश्च बहून् वरिष्यन्ति तवाहिताः निन्दन्तस्तव सामर्थ्यं ततो दुःखतरं नु किम् अथो वा प्राप्स्यसि स्वर्गं जित्वा वा भोक्ष्यसे महिम् तस्मादुत्तिष्ठ कौन्तेय युद्धाय कृतनिश्चयः सुखदुःखे समे कृत्वा लाभालाभौ जयाजयौ ततो युद्धाय युज्यस्व नैवं पापमवाप्स्यसि एषा ते विहिता साङ्ख्ये बुद्धिर्योगे त्विमां शृणु बुद्ध्या युक्तो यया पार्थ कर्मबन्धं प्रहास्यसि नेहाभिक्रमनाशोऽस्ति मृत्यवायो न विद्यते स्वल्पमत्यस्य धर्मस्य त्रायते महतो भयात्
So we'll continue with the study of the Gita where we left off last time. And last time we did chapter 2, verse 40, up through verse 40. So now we will begin with verse 41. And so again, just for review, after Arjuna decided not to fight, at first Sri Krishna challenges his manhood, his strength, his valor. That was his first challenge to him. And then he begins to teach him about the nature of the self and says that the self is eternal and the self of all beings is eternal. That which exists can never become non-existent, and that which is non-existent can never be made to exist. And so what is there to fear in death? That death is only, he doesn't say it this way, but it is, well, he does say it this way. It's only a change of appearance. And it says, he doesn't say it the way Sri Ramakrishna does, as Sri Ramakrishna told Holy Mother after his passing when he appeared to her, he said, "Where do you think I have gone? It's only like going from one room to the other. I'm still here." And Sri Krishna tells Arjuna that there's no need to fear or stand up and fight. And Sri Krishna always comes back in this chapter to that tasmad yudhyasva bharata. Therefore, stand up and fight, O Arjuna. And then he says, as you'll remember, that even if you don't believe in the eternity of the self, even then you should fight, because death is natural. It comes to everyone. So why should you grieve over that which is natural, that which happens anyway? Even Einstein, who was in his own way a great man. He was not an illumined soul, but he was a great man of great, not just a genius, but of some depth. And he said that to worry or fear death is the most unnecessary thing, because it's that which is certain for everyone. And so and so in Sri Krishna's words, why worry over that which is going to happen anyway? And it's going to happen, let it happen. And then in the last verses that we went over, he says that swadharmam api chavekshya, also from the standpoint of your swadharma. Having looked at your swadharma, you shouldn't navikambitum arhasi, you shouldn't tremble. You shouldn't tremble with fear, looking from the standpoint of dharma also. Because there's nothing greater for a kshatriya than a righteous battle. And then he tells them that hatva va what is that? I know that one, and now I can't think of it out of context. Jitva va bhokshase mahim, but first hato va prapsyasi swargam. Yes, hato va prapsyasi swargam, jitva va bhokshase mahim. So hato va prapsyasi swargam. If you are defeated, then you go to heaven, to swarga. And jitva va bhokshase mahim. And if you conquer, then you enjoy the earth. So then what should you fear? Tasmad uttishta kauntaya. Therefore stand up, or tato yudhaya kritanischaya. So stand up, O Arjuna, and be prepared to fight. Tasmad uttishta kauntaya yudhaya kritanischaya. Having taken a firm decision to fight. And so now the focus goes, it's a natural development, but it goes a little into another realm now. So in verse 41, he says, Vyavasayatmika buddhir ekeha guru nandana bahushaka yanantasya buddhayo vyavasayinam. So vyavasayatmika buddhi ekeha guru nandana. Eka iha Kuru Nandana. So, O Kuru Nandana, that is the scion of the Kuru dynasty. Eka iha vyavasadmika buddhi. There's a single understanding in the form of certainty. So the buddhi as understanding vyavasayatmika. the certainty about reality. So this understanding, this certainty about reality is one bahushaka hyanantascha buddhayo vyavasayanam, of those who have no firm understanding of vyavasayatmika, of them bahushaka hyanantascha buddhaya. The buddhi, the understanding, is many branched and quite diverse, innumerable. So Sayan of the Kuru dynasty, in this there is a single understanding in the form of certainty about the self, vyavasayatmika, buddhi. The thoughts of those who lack certainty about the self have many branches, bahushaka, and are indeed innumerable, anantascha, and innumerable. So in this, what he had said in the previous one was that swalpamapyasya dharmasya, or nehadhikramanashosti pratyavayo navidyate. In this wisdom, there is no destruction of the results of actions, nor is there any contrary result. Swalpamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Even a little bit of this will take you across the great fear of death. Mahato bhayat, the great fear, from the great fear. And so in this understanding of the self, which Sri Krishna has been teaching Arjuna, from the 11th verse of this chapter, he says that in this understanding of the self, which I've been teaching you, O Arjuna, in this certainty about the self, this vyavasayatmika buddhi, this certainty and this understanding, is single, ekeha, is one only. One of the things that we find in spiritual life is that gradually the mind becomes ekagra. Ekagra meaning coming to one point. So in our own lives, whether we follow a path of devotion, whether we follow the path of knowledge, whether we follow the path of yoga or karma yoga, we find that the mind gradually becomes simple. The mind becomes simple in the sense, not of simple-minded, but in the sense of being focused. That more and more the mind becomes focused. That the more restless the mind is, the more the mind wants to go out and look at all sorts of things and get involved in all sorts of things. But the more focused the mind becomes, the more the mind tends to settle within itself. It doesn't want to go out so much. It doesn't want to look in all directions and investigate everything. It's content with an inward direction. The mind becomes focused in that way. Sri Ramakrishna said that after he had the ultimate experience of nirvikalpa samadhi, where the mind disappears in that which is non-duality, it's not even unity anymore, because when there is one and only one, no two, no three, no four, then even one itself disappears. We have one only if there's 2, 3, 4, 5. But when 2, 3, 4, 5 have disappeared, then even the sense of oneness disappears. So it's so one that there's not even any one there. That's why it's called non-duality. It's not called ekatva, it's called advaita. And so Sri Ramakrishna, after the experience of nirvikalpa samadhi, he said that he couldn't even eat different dishes on his plate. If people would, and this was after he'd come back down from it, but after spending 6 months in nirvikalpa samadhi, and he said even now sometimes that comes over him, he would say, that if people served him a thali with the different bhatis and different dishes and things, he would have to take everything and mix it together, because the mind just wouldn't come to diversity. The mind was so focused that everything was unitary. And so even the idea of diversity of tastes, that was gone from him. And that's said to be the last thing that goes. And so Sayan of the Kuru dynasty, in this there's a single understanding, ekeha Kuru Nandana, in the form of certainty, vyavasayatmika buddhi. The thoughts of those who lack certainty, avyavasayatmikanam, of those who don't have this certainty. Bahushaka hyanantascha. It's many-branched, and the mind is many-branched, and the intentions are innumerable. That I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I want to do this, I want to have that, I want to experience this, I want to see that. No. So it doesn't mean that a person who has become very focused, that they can't deal with, except in the case of one like Ramakrishna who had gone so far. But a person who has become advanced, it doesn't mean that they can't deal with different things. No, they can. But the tendency of the mind is to be singular. And that singular mind can apply itself to different things, but not for the same reason that we do. When the mind is restless, then everything in the world looks interesting and looks like something that I want to inquire into. But when the mind becomes settled, then we find that, no, I can deal with everything, but I don't want to go out of my way to deal with anything. Things that come to me, let me deal with, because I have to. That's my dharma. But I don't want to go out and just make complications for myself. So this goes on with several verses that are taken together. They all form one long sentence, verses 42 through 44. So we'll chant those 3 verses together. Yamimam pushpitam vacham pravadantya vipastitaha Vedavanaratha partha nanyadasti vadinaha Kamatmana swargaparam janma karma phalam pradam Kriya vishesha bahulam bhogaishwarya gatim prati Bhogaishwarya prasaktanam taya pahrita chetasam Vyavasayatmika buddhi samadhau na vidhiyate. So this yamimam pushpitam vacham, these flowery words. Now here he's talking about the Vedas. So Swami Vivekananda used to say, the Vedas are the only scriptures in the world that say, not that this is Veda, but it's close to it. But the Vedas themselves say it. The Vedas are the only scriptures in the world which say it's not through the Veda that one comes to the highest truth. That the truth is beyond the Veda. The Veda points the way. Now in Orthodox Hinduism, as in other religions, there are those who put so much emphasis on the Vedas that there have been some who have criticized Swami Vivekananda. They say that, oh, Swami Vivekananda, he talks about experience. The Vedas are true because of experience. The Vedas are not true because of experience. Your experience is true because it's in the Vedas. The Vedas are the truth. And experience is only true if it matches the Vedas. But the Vedas are more important than your experience. Swami Vivekananda said, no. The Vedas are true because they can be experienced. The Vedas are not true because there's a book called the Vedas, which some ancient tradition says you have to believe these because these were given by the Creator and they're the repository of all wisdom. How do we know that? How do we know that the Vedas are true? Because somebody told you? Because for thousands of years somebody believed it? That's why you believe the Vedas are true? No. That's an insult to the human mind, to think that I'm going to believe something because people have been saying that for a long time, and so I'll go on saying it, and my children will go on saying it, and their children will go on saying it, and it's true because people say it's true. No. Or it's true because the book says it's true. Well, that's how people of different religions point to their scripture and say, my Bible is true because it says it's true. No, my Quran is true because it says it's true. Oh no, my Tripitaka is true because it says it's true. My Vedas are true because it says it's true. No. What is the test of truth? What is the test of truth? If you have a contradiction between the Bible and the Quran and the Veda, how do you know what is true? And if all of them say that we are the truth, then how do you know? Just because your ancestors said so, who cares for your ancestors? Who cares for that? I'm not saying that you shouldn't respect your ancestors or that I shouldn't respect my ancestors, but for a person who is not born from your ancestors, why should they respect your ancestors? Why are they going to say, oh, my ancestors say it's true. Oh, your ancestors say it's true? Oh, then it must be true. It has to be true. If your ancestors said it's true, it's certainly true. No, that's nonsense. So that idea, well, no, the Vedas are true and everything else has to match the Vedas. No. Swami Vivekananda and Sri Ramakrishna both said what is there in the Vedas themselves, that it's experience which is the proof of truth. It's because these can be experienced. The Vedas are true insofar as they can be experienced, not otherwise. Who told you that the Vedas came from the Creator? Some ancient tradition, some man 5,000 years ago said they were breathed out by the Creator. Well, that's good for you, but what does that mean to anybody else? You can't use that as proof. That's no proof to anybody. So it may be true. That may be true. I'm not saying it's not true, but it's not proof of anything. Oh, the Vedas were breathed out by Brahma. Who knows that? Did anyone here see Brahma breathe out the Vedas? No, but somebody said that a long time ago. That's what we believe. Well, who cares for your belief? And again, I'm talking as a skeptic. I'm not a skeptic myself, but taking the position of a skeptic who's outside of the tradition. So again, people, they're great and famous teachers, modern teachers, who have criticized Swami Vivekananda saying, who cares for his experience? Well, who cares for your Vedas? Who cares for your idea of the Vedas? You're going to pit yourself against Swami Vivekananda, who had Nirvikalpa Samadhi, and you haven't had any kind of Samadhi. And you're going to pit yourself against him and say that, no, the Vedas are true and Swami Vivekananda is nonsense. No, that itself is nonsense. And so there has to be some proof of truth. There has to be some criterion of truth. And that criterion to be, if it's a universal truth, that criterion cannot be, oh, my ancestors said so. Oh, somebody said a long time ago, or a book says so. No, that's no criterion of truth. That may be true, or it may not be true, but it's not a criterion of truth. The criterion of truth is what? That it can be directly perceived and known to be true in direct experience. Aparokshanubhuti, immediate experience. And that experience of the highest truths, which are taught in the Vedas, that is self-evident if we have that experience. Until we have that experience, as Swami Vivekananda said, we're all really atheists. We just mouth words and all of that. If we can get the experience, then the experience is undeniable. I see you how? I see you through the eyes. And the eyes are connected to the optic nerve, and the optic nerve to the brain. And then there's so much processing and everything, and then I see the world. And this that I'm seeing is just the reaction of the mind to signals which are coming into the eyes and going through the optic nerve and then being processed in the brain. That's what I'm seeing. So I'm not seeing you. I'm seeing my mind's recreation of signals that have come to it from the eyes and the retina and the cells in the retina, the receptors, and the message on the optic nerve and everything. So all of my sense experience, this world which looks so real to me, it's mediated. It's brought to me by the senses and by the brain through so much processing. But if we have a deep spiritual experience, that's unmediated knowledge. That doesn't come through the senses. It's immediately present in the consciousness. And then if that happens, then we see, yes, this is true. This is true. And that's how we know that the ultimate teachings of the Vedas, or even Shankaracharya himself, the embodiment of Vedantic orthodoxy, he said that the purpose of the Vedas is to teach transcendental truths, atindriya, that which is beyond the senses, truths beyond the senses. If the Veda says something about creation, which is found to be untrue, then that's okay, forget it, because the purpose of the Vedas is not to teach about creation. That Shankaracharya himself said. If the Vedas say, you take like the case with the Bible, many Christians accept the story of Genesis just as a story, an allegory, But those who are fundamentalists say, no, God actually created the world in 6 days, 5,437 years ago, starting on a Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock. Bishop Ulster, I think it was, or I forget his name, who figured out going through the Bible and figuring out generations and how many years would be in a generation and things. He went back to the creation of Genesis and decided it was something like 5,000 years or something else, and that there were actually 6 days of creation. And so if you believe that to be history, believe that every word in the Bible is literally true, then you have to take that. Then when you have scientific evidence to the contrary, you have to throw out scientific evidence. That does great harm to the mind, because you're denying evidence which is right there in front of you and believing something in a book. Believing something in a book. So taking it as a story, as an allegory, it's a beautiful story, but taking it as history. And so Shankaracharya said that with the Vedas, that if the Vedas tell something about creation which is not true, it can either be taken as an allegory, indicating something else, its purpose is to indicate something else, or it can be ignored, because the purpose of the Veda is to teach that which is atindriya, that which is beyond the senses, that which you can't get through the sense organs and the reasoning mind. And so that was a great freedom that Shankaracharya gave. And so again, the purpose of the Vedas is that. But there are many other things in the Vedas, and that's what Sri Krishna is talking about here. Yamimam pushpitam vacham pravadanti avipastitaha, the avipastitaha, the people without wisdom, the unenlightened people, pravadanti, they speak flowery words. So, son of Pritha, the unenlightened people who accept as the best this talk, which is flowery, Vedavada rata partha, nanyadastiti varina, who say that nanyadastiti varina, they say that there's nothing else but these flowery words of the Vedas. O son of Pritha, the unenlightened people who accept this as the best, this talk, which is flowery, pushpitam vacham, which is a producer of births, actions, and their results. Janma karma phalapranam. Again, in Sanskrit, if you go to translate it, or even if you go to understand a verse, you take a word here and you find the next word you have to understand is way down here, and then there's one here, and then you have to go here and then there. The first thing you do when analyzing a Sanskrit verse, even if you know Sanskrit well, is to get the anvaya, the prose order, the natural spoken order of the language. So you take a verse and you put it back in the prose order. And so then when you go to translate, you find that, okay, now I've got to do this word, now the next word is this one, and then over here, then up here, then down here. So that's what's happening here. So, which is a producer of births, actions, and their results. Janma karma phala pradam, and which abounds in special rights that are the means to the attainment of enjoyment and sovereignty. Kamatmana swargapara kriya vishesha bahulam bhogaishwarya gatim prati, which are the means to the attainment of enjoyment and sovereignty, who remain engrossed in the eulogistic utterances of the Vedas. Yamimam pushpitam vacham atayaparita chetasam, who declare that nothing else exists, nanyadastiti vadinaha, who are full of desires, kamatmana, who have heaven alone as the highest goal, swargapara, who are attached to enjoyment and sovereignty, bhogaishwarya gatim prati, and whose discriminating knowledge is carried away by that talk. The understanding in the form of certainty about the self does not arise in their minds. So vyavasayatmika buddhi samadhau na vidhiyate. And those who speak about all of this, as heaven as the highest goal, attached to the flowery words, who want bhogaishwarya, bhoga and aishwarya, that is enjoyment and sovereignty, or enjoyment and power. Those whose goal is enjoyment and power, who say that the nanyadastiti vadina, who say that there's nothing other than this, enjoyment and so forth, which comes through doing the Vedic rites. So again, Sri Krishna is criticizing the attachment to that aspect of the Vedas, which was following rites and rituals for the attainment of bhoga and aishwarya, enjoyment and power. Bhoga Aishwarya Prasaktanam, of those who are attached to bhoga and aishwarya, to enjoyment and power, Tayaparita Chetasam, whose minds are taken away by that attachment. Vyavasayatmika buddhi samadhau na vidhiyate. And the Vyavasayatmika buddhi, that's a certainty of the knowledge, certainty in the knowledge of the self, samadhau na vidhiyate, is not established in concentration. Their minds are not established in the concentration. So, again, Swami Vivekananda said that the Vedas are the only scriptures in the world which themselves say that it's not by the study of the Vedas that one comes to the highest realization. And so then Sri Krishna goes on with verse 45. Traigunya Vishaya Vela Nistraiguryo Bhavarjuna Nirdvandvo Nitya Sattvasto Niryogaksema Atmavan. Traigunya Vishaya Vela. The Vedas are concerned with things of the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. The things that we can see, that we can sense. That's what the Vedas are concerned with. Now here he's not talking about the Upanishads and their highest teaching, which is, again, the Gita is, how is that? Om iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita su Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayam. So at the end of every chapter of the Gita, it says, now in the Upanishad of the Bhagavad Gita. So the Bhagavad Gita is considered the essence of the Upanishads. So Sri Krishna is not criticizing the Brahma Jnana, which is taught in the Upanishads. What he is criticizing is the attachment to the rites and rituals that are meant for the attainment of heaven. So we have to remember that historically, the Gita comes in the Mahabharata, and the Mahabharata, like the Ramayana was older, but both the Ramayana and the Mahabharata came late in the Vedic age. Late in the Vedic age, when the Upanishads, perhaps at the time of the Upanishads or something like that, that the stories of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, the actual writing them down and composing the verses, that came later, after the close of the Vedic period, most probably. But the traditions spoken of in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, that comes from the late Vedic age. This was a time when the Vedas were still the religion of the people, not the Puranic age, which came afterwards. And so this was a time which you see in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Srimad Bhagavatam is written much later. Of course, it has ancient traditions, but it was written much later. Just 10 centuries or so ago. Some say even more recently, but probably 10 centuries or so ago. The Srimad Bhagavatam was finalized and written down. But even in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is much later, you see there, and you see in the Mahabharata, the Vishnu Purana, which is also very old, you find this, the people, the Vedic people, coming to terms with the end of the Vedic age. And the end of the Brahmanas, that is when the rites and rituals ruled the country and ruled the culture. Because at that time, India was much more than a country. It was a vast culture which stretched all the way from Afghanistan through Burma and Thailand, etc. So it was a vast cultural movement. But you see the evidence of the conflict arising as the people were moving towards a more philosophical and spiritual view and away from the rites and rituals of the Brahmanas. The Brahmanas had started with the tradition where there was a simple fire in the home where people would make their offerings, a simple religion, a religion that anyone could do, that anyone that was part of the tradition could do. But then gradually in the Brahmanas, the rites and rituals became more and more complicated. So that some of them took all of king's wealth, everything some of them took years to perform, took vast wealth to perform. Some of them were extremely complicated. And so that's the problem with ritualism. Ritualism is a wonderful tool to focus the mind and to call out, to evoke good devotional sentiments and so forth. But there's a tendency in ritual to make it more and more complicated. Okay, well, let me do a panchopachar puja, I'll just make a few offerings. Or no, you start with, let me just wave some incense and I'll light a lamp. And well, let me offer a few flowers also, that's good. And then some days later, well, let me give a plate of sweets, that's good also. Then, well, yeah, I could do a panchopachar puja, so I do the 5 items and everything, that's very good. And then you think, well, why panchopachar? I could do dashopachar puja, I could do 10 items. So then let me start doing that. Well, why not shodashopachar? Why don't I do 16 items? And then pretty soon you find you're doing so many things that you don't have time to do anything else, and then your life is falling apart, and you're running around concerned because, well, I've got so many things to do for the puja, I can't do anything else. But no, that's the danger in puja. So it's good to establish from the beginning that this much I can do, and this I will do. And once in a while, if I want to do a little more, that's fine, but this is what I will do. There's something that's manageable. And so that's what happened in the Vedic age. The rituals became more and more complicated. They took more and more time, more and more wealth, etc. More and more difficult to do, so that there was a lot of specialization of the priests and so forth in order to perform it. And so then you find the reaction of the Upanishads, where they sought the knowledge of truth, that there's no end to this ritualism. No, we want to know the truth. What is consciousness? What is this self of a human being? What is existence? From where has all of this come? Not who made it and how did they make it and what's the story behind it, but no, what is the source of this universe? Out of what has it come? So asking about principles. So in the Upanishads you find that, and you find in the Bhagavatam, Vishnu Purana, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, this process in various ways coming forth, where people's attention were moving from the complexity of rituals towards the spiritual side of things. And so you find the story in the Srimad Bhagavatam, probably in the Vishnu Purana, but I don't remember it, but it's in the Srimad Bhagavatam, a famous incident where Sri Krishna tells his friends that you don't need to worship Indra. And then Indra gets very upset that I'm not getting my offerings and everything, and so he begins to create a huge storm, terrible storm. And so then Sri Krishna, the Govardhan mountain, and uses it as an umbrella to protect his friends and their families from the terrible storm. That was a sign of the movement away from the old Vedic gods, Indra and the others, and towards the modern in India means going back 5,000 years, that's modern. The modern gods of Hinduism, of Vishnu, Shiva, etc. And so Sri Krishna telling the people that you don't need to worship Indra, that by worshipping Vishnu you get everything. And then Indra, it doesn't deny the existence of Indra, but he shows that, but if you worship Vishnu, if you worship the Supreme Lord, the Lord will protect you. Even if Indra gets upset, the Lord will protect you. And so like that, you find in these stories the gradual movement away from some of the Vedic traditions towards the spiritual traditions. And so that you see here also, where Sri Krishna is openly criticizing that aspect of the Vedas. Not the truths of the Vedas, but that aspect of the Vedas. So Traigunya Vishaya Veda. The Vedas deal with the things of the 3 gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Nistraigunyo Bhavarjuna. Be beyond the 3 gunas, O Arjuna. The Vedas teach things of this world. Be beyond that. Again, he wasn't talking about Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, things like that. But the Karma Kanda of the Vedas, the old part of the Vedas, the vast mass of the Vedic literature, the Samhitas, Brahmanas, and even into the Aranyakas, that they largely teach things of this world. And so you be beyond that, O Arjuna. Nirdvandvo nitya sattvasto. Be nirdvandvo, beyond dualities, sukha dukkha, happiness and misery, jaya jayo, conquest and failure, etc. Nitya sattvasto. Nitya sattva staha. Stha, tishtati stha, be established, be steady in nitya sattva, in the eternal sattva, which is the buddhi. That is, be established in the purity of the highest part of the mind. Be established there. And Atmavan, one who is completely identified with the Atma, with the self. So as he translates it here, O Arjuna, the Vedas have the effect of the three gunas as their object. You become desireless, free from the pairs of duality, poised in unwavering sattva, devoid of the desire for acquisition and preservation. Oh yes, that's right, that was Yogakshema, I forgot that. Near Yogakshema, yoga acquisition, and kshema, preservation of that which you have. So be free from that desire for acquisition and preservation, and dependent on the self. So now be free from acquisition and preservation. How do you do that? If you have a family, even if you run an ashram like this, if you run a monastery, you have to provide for it. You have to provide for its stability and so forth. So here it doesn't mean giving up your swadharma. It doesn't mean becoming irresponsible. It means not having your mind possessed by that. And we can see that in ourselves, and we can see it in others. Better to look at it in ourselves. That there are times when we can manage things, but we're not obsessed with trying to manage them. We just realize that, okay, these things have to be managed, I'll manage them and take care of them, but the mind is free in the midst of it. And other times when we're so worried, I said, oh, how are we going to do this, how are we going to do that, oh my goodness, this problem is coming and that problem is coming, and the mind is just spinning and spinning and spinning with its involvement with things. So that we have to learn to avoid. That's a lifetime's work. That doesn't happen just because a book tells you not to do it. It happens because you spend a lifetime working at it, and eventually you find that the mind can be freed from that sort of agitation which comes from the actions and reactions of the world, when you can keep the mind steady. So if we're not there, let us work at it. Let us work at it. And if we know that that's where we're going, then we find that we can imagine ourselves in that state, and that helps us approximate it. It helps us get there. If we can imagine that state, if we can imagine, as I told, I think it was on Sunday or last Tuesday, I forget when I said, say what, but recently I said in one of the talks about when I was at Trabuco, there was this English Swami who had been in the British Army, and he was a prisoner of war all during World War II in Japan and all of that. And he had been a medic. And whenever there was any, an accident, like one day there was a brahmachari, he later left the order, but he still is a close devotee. In fact, he lives just near Bellarmut now, an American. He's recently lived in Trabuco many years, now he lives near Bellarmut, Roland. He was cutting the grass in Trabuco, and he was on a steep hill. And he did what you're never supposed to do on a riding lawnmower, that is, he went sideways on the hill. You can go down or you can go up, but you don't go sideways. So he did that, and it rolled down the hill with him on top of the mower, and they rolled down this long, steep embankment. And so got to the bottom, and he's got broken bones and can't move, and the lawnmower's on top of him, not the blade, but the body of this riding mower. And so Swami Bhadrananda, this English Swami, was brought, and everybody else says, oh my God, what do we do? Look at Roland, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And Swami Bhadrananda was, as we say, cool as a cucumber. He just went and assessed the situation and said, oh, this is what we need. It's okay. You know, everything will be okay. And so that ability, that was not that he could do that in every situation, perhaps, maybe he could, but because he was trained in that. He was trained in emergency medicine. And so just knowing, when I heard about that story, I had an image in my mind. Oh yes, that's possible. That's possible. If I get in a situation like that, it doesn't do me or anyone any good to go, oh my God, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Running around in circles. Just to look and see, okay, what happened? Now what can we do? Just having that image of, yes, that can be done. I can do that. I can learn to do that. And so, if we have this idea of being nitya sattvasto, yogakshema, nir-yogakshema, that is being free from the desire for acquisition and preservation of my things, then I can approximate it. I can approximate it. And find that I begin to get closer and closer to it. So, O Arjuna, the Vedas have the effect of the three gunas as their object. You become desireless, free from the pairs of duality, poised in unwavering sattva, devoid of the desire for acquisition and preservation, and dependent on the self. And then verse 46, Yamanartha udapane sarvata samplutodake tavan sarveshu vedeshu brahmanasya vijanatah. So this is a very famous verse and a very beautiful verse, saying that Yavan artha udapane sarvata samplutodake. As much value as there is in as much need as there is for water when the whole countryside is flooded with water. Tavan sarveshu vedeshu brahmanasya vijanata. So much need is there for all of the Vedas in a Brahmana who has known the highest truth. The idea is that a Brahmana who has known the truth, and here Brahmana doesn't mean the Brahmana caste, because Sri Krishna himself was Kshatriya, and Arjuna was a Kshatriya. It means one who is absorbed in Brahman. So, in that sense, a Brahmana who knows the self, one who is absorbed in Brahman, then the Vedas have as much use as a pot of water does to a man who's in a flooded country where there's water everywhere. So, or as they translated here, the extent of need fulfilled in a well is fulfilled to that extent in a reservoir of water filled from all sides. Similarly, the extent of need fulfilled by the Vedas gets fulfilled to that extent in the case of a seeker of Brahman when he has realization. So again, the Yavanartha udapane, sarvata samplutodake. Sarvata samplutodake, meaning that everywhere there's water. Everything is flooded. There's water everywhere. I've never been to Bangladesh, but I've seen Bangladesh from Cherrapunji. And from several places in Meghalaya, I've seen Bangladesh, looking down into the area around Sylhet. And so in Meghalaya, where I was, of course, there's heavy rains. When I was there last summer, this time last year, I was in Cherrapunji. We had several days when we had 12 inches of rain a day. Every day, 12 inches of rain. And, and so where does that water go? There's no flooding in Meghalaya, because in Meghalaya everything is like this. So the result of all the water falling in Meghalaya is the flooding in Bangladesh. And so at that time, when there's a huge rains, the rainy season, I was there in the rainy season in Meghalaya, tremendous rains. You look out and see Bangladesh far, far down below. From up in the mountains, you see way down below, but water everywhere. So like that, for someone who is in a flooded country like that, then the need that you have for a pot of water is like the need of Brahmana, a knowing Brahmana, a man of realization, his need for the Vedas when he's full of realization. As Sri Ramakrishna said, the scriptures are like a grocery list. They tell you what you need. But once you have done your shopping, then what do you need with the grocery list? You don't need it. It has a purpose. It has its place. But its place is to tell you what you need. Once you get it, then you don't go around and carrying the grocery list and reading it all day after you've already gone shopping. No. And framing it and putting it up on your wall so you can see it every day. No. You've already done your shopping. It's over. So you can discard it. And so the same with the Vedas. Same with the scriptures. Again, that doesn't mean, because the Gita itself is a scripture. The Gita itself is a scripture. And so the scriptures for us are to be revered because they teach us the truth, because they are the repositories of the experience of many, many people. Again, but they're repositories of experience. Repositories of experiences that we can emulate and repeat in our own lives. But that's their value, is that they tell us where to go and how to get there. But once we've gone there, then what need do we have? The great Ramana Maharshi, all of you have heard of, the great sage of Tiruvannamalai. He, of course, had his realization when he was 16 years old, and the rest of his long life, he lived to about the age of 70, something like that. I forget exactly, but 70 or in the early 70s when he passed away. So from 16 until he passed away, he lived in a state of illumination. And he's one of those that everyone recognized him to be an illumined soul. He was not controversial in any way. Everybody knew that, no, he's a fully illumined soul. So after he started becoming known, for some years he just lived in a cave in Tiruvannamalai. First he lived in the basement of the temple for a short time, and then on the hill, and then he went to a cave. And later he came down to the what became an ashram. But for some years he was not well known because he was just leading a silent life, not speaking to anyone. But then he gradually became known. And when he became known, some of the officials from, I don't know if it was Kanchipuram or which Shanga, or from, might also have been from Sringeri. But anyway, some of the officials from the Shankaracharya, some of these traditional sadhus from the Shankaracharya came to Tiruvannamalai and told Ramana Maharshi that, revered sir, you should take sannyasa, because the scriptures, the Mundaka Upanishad says that the self cannot be realized by one who does not have the proper signs. And so that has been interpreted by Shankaracharya as the signs of sannyasa. So one who doesn't wear the Garua cloth and all of that can't attain to the knowledge of the self. And Ramana Maharshi said, I have no need of that. And they said, but sir, for the preservation of the scriptures and people's respect for the scriptures, you should take sannyasa so that the tradition is maintained. You should take sannyasa to maintain the tradition. Because this is the tradition in the, among the sannyasis, that only by sannyasashram, only in the sannyasashram, with all of the external signs, can one attain to the highest knowledge. So Ramana Maharshi refused. He said, I have no need of that. And that's true. That itself was a great teaching. In fact, that was a more important teaching than had he taken sannyasa just in order to protect the respect for the scriptures. Because it showed that illumination is not dependent on a particular external form of life. It's not dependent on an external form of life. It's not dependent on an ashrama. It's not dependent on a varna. The Holy Mother herself, when people would come to her, and some would say, some who would come to her and want to become monks, and the Holy Mother would be delighted and would give them the Garua cloth and everything, which in the case of a great soul like her, giving the Garua cloth was as good as giving them sannyasa. Though later they would go to Swami Brahmananda and go through the ceremony, but her giving it was the real thing. But there were others who came to Holy Mother and she would say, no, it's better to remain in white like me. Better to remain in white like me. Because the Garua cloth is associated with so much egotism and so forth. So she would tell them that you stay like I am. So Holy Mother herself, the Divine Mother herself, who had Nirvikalpa Samadhi, had lived in a very high spiritual state, she never took sannyasa. Sri Ramakrishna did, but Holy Mother didn't. Ramana Maharshi didn't. And so, traditions are good. Traditions are very good. They give strength and stability to a society. But they are not everything. So we always have to know the distinction between the kernel of truth and the external form. The external form may help us get to the kernel of truth, but it's the kernel of truth that we want. It's not the external form. And so that's all what all of this is about, which Sri Krishna is saying here to Arjuna. That that's what we want, not the flowery words of the Vedas and all of that, but we want the inner experience. And if you have the inner experience, then the Vedas have served their purpose, and there's no further need for them. Why is that so important? There are several reasons, and I've already indicated the main reason, but to say the same thing in a different way, there was a great Christian monk, Father Henri Le Sceau. He was French Benedictine, who came to India in the 1940s. And when he came from France to India, a Benedictine monk, he was a real monk, not a priest, preaching priest or anything, but he was a contemplative monk, that is, one who spends his life in study and prayer. But he came to India to convert the Hindus. He said that, how can I make the Hindus realize that Christ is the only way? He said that before he came to India. But he was going to do that as a contemplative monk, again, not going out into the cities and knocking on people's doors and so forth, but by leading a life and trying to guide people into Christianity. But what happened when he came to India was he began to study the Vedanta in order to learn how the people thought so that he could convert them. And he himself became a Vedantin. And he took sannyasa, and he took the name Swami Abhishektananda. Abhishekta refers to Christ. The word Christ means the anointed one. That is, the one who is anointed to be the chosen of God. And so Abhishekta means, of course, the anointed in Sanskrit. And so he whose bliss is in the Christ is the meaning of Abhishektananda. So he became a Hindu sannyasi and remained a Catholic monk till the end of his life, but also a Hindu sannyasi. So of all of the different, especially among Roman Catholics, you don't find it among Protestants much because they're not interested generally in mysticism. But among the Catholics in India who tried to find some sort of rapprochement with Hinduism, he went further than anyone because he became a genuine Vedanti. He used to go and live in the cave on Arunachala, where Ramana Maharshi lived, and meditate there. He took a Hindu guru, Swami Jnanananda, who died while I was in India in around 1980. He was one of those who was said to be something like 240 years old when he died. Indira Gandhi, as Prime Minister, went to see him, and he was very famous as an illumined soul. So this Abhishektananda wrote a beautiful book on his guru, Swami Jnanananda, and the instructions he got from his guru. So he was somebody who became a real Hindu, a real Vedantin, a non-dualist Advaitin, while remaining a Christian. So he was not, that idea of missionizing was completely gone from him. He united in himself these two traditions. So all of this is to say that he said that he wrote a beautiful book, one of the most beautiful books you can find on the Upanishads and on sannyasa. I forget the name of it, but it's a beautiful small book, part of it on the Upanishads, part of it on the institution of sannyasa. He said that the one thing that Christianity lacks more than anything else is the ideal of sannyasa. Because in Christianity, there's the idea that until the end of your life, no matter how saintly you become, no matter how devoted you become, you're always still basically a sinner, and you're dependent on the church, and you're dependent on church authority, and you have to follow all of the rites and everything of the church. You're still under the Bible. So Swami Vivekananda said that every Westerner walks around with a church on top of their head, and on top of the church there's a book, the Bible. And so that's the same thing in different terms that Abhishektananda was saying, that in Christianity there's no idea of complete transcendence, but in Hinduism there is, in Vedanta there is. That an Avadhuta, he's gone beyond the world, he's gone beyond the Dharma Shastras, he's gone beyond civil society, he's gone beyond the Vedas. Swamiji wrote to Mary Hale, "Sister, you don't understand us. The sannyasi stands on the head of the Vedas. That is, the Vedas don't stand on the head of the man of illumination. The man of illumination stands on the Vedas. is superior to the Vedas. And so Swami Abhishektananda said that's the one thing Christianity lacks. I know a great and very famous Christian monk who's still alive now, though he's very, very old, in his mid-90s, I think. Very well known and very highly respected, a man of some spiritual experience. He told me years ago, I knew him very well and used to go to meetings with him every year, told me that a time came in his spiritual life in the monastery when he found going to the Mass, that is the ceremony, which in the monastery you go to every day. He found it extremely painful. Why? Because his mind had become unified. And so then to go through all of the ritual and everything, and his mind just wouldn't do it. It was like forcing someone like, of course not to compare him to Sri Ramakrishna, but in the case of Sri Ramakrishna, when he got to the point where he couldn't do the worship of the Divine Mother, you couldn't have forced his mind to go do that. And yet this father, this monk, had to go to Mass every day unless he was sick. He couldn't become holy enough or saintly enough, so that was no longer necessary, no. And he was still under obedience to the monastery, to the abbot, to Rome, etc. There was no idea of what Swamiji said, going beyond the church, going beyond the kindergartens of religion, to complete freedom. But that Hinduism has, and so that's what Sri Krishna is speaking about here. That complete state of freedom is where we want to go. The kindergartens of religion are good. Most of us need kindergarten. Most of us are not ready for anything but kindergarten, and so it's good to use kindergarten. But know that it is kindergarten. And what we're doing is kindergarten, and we're doing it because we need it, but that's not the essence. The essence is that experience which takes us beyond all churches, all organizations, all scriptures, everything else. So we'll stop here. And I'll give the closing chant and then the announcements after the closing chant, so that won't be included in the recording. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. That infinite reality is full, perfect, and complete. This relative universe is full, perfect, and complete. From out of the fullness of that infinite being, the fullness of this universe has come, and yet that being remains ever the same. Oh, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all the beings of the universe. So for announcements,